Hey there. Some of you may have already seen my video that I did. It was a short about crawfish boil I was going to do for my choir members at my church. And they're a fine tradition when it comes around Good Friday and Easter here in Louisiana. Of course, I'm not native Louisianian. I'm actually a North Carolina Tarheel and come here, and even after living in South Louisiana for a good 5 or more years, learned that even the area that I live in, Louisiana, was kind of a considered Yankee territory. But this is what I have kind of gathered and learned about the whole process of boiling crawfish, and it can make for a fun experience overall. One thing I will say is, if you like my content, like my channel, please like, comment, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell sort of thing. All those things sort of help us to kind of grow this channel, and I can make more content for you. But when it comes to boiling crawfish, in that initial short, I was just gathering some of the items. And some of the items that you'll need, one, this is outdoor cooking, so you'll need some type of burner or one of those. My best is generally a jet burner, propane burner that my dad had that operates on the propane tanks. You can use a turkey fryer depending on the PSI of your regulator and how it comes out. It may slow your cooking time because they just don't get up as fast. We call them jet burners because once you light that thing, it sounds like a jet engine. But anyway, there are also, if you go to a sporting goods store, you'll see specialty cookers that actually have baskets that lift up and down. The price of those, if you're only going to do this kind of recreationally or for a fun experience, I wouldn't recommend investing in the big specialty cooker because it's a little cost prohibitive unless you're planning on doing these type of events regularly for folks and stuff. If you do have older jet burner or turkey fryer stuff, make sure you check the hoses, the valves, the regulator, and the nozzles, all of those sort of things, because if it's been a while since you've done some outdoor cooking, the rubber sort of hoses that they use for the fuel can deteriorate. I had to actually change one out on the turkey fryer that I was using because we were doing a couple of different things. But also, if you're in an area where you have like the dirt daubers and wasps, they can build nests in any little open holes, and they love to get up in those things. I actually had to totally kind of clean out this one burner on the same turkey fryer. But another thing you'll need is an ice chest of pretty good size, because generally live crawfish sacks come in about 30-pound sacks, which are kind of big. Now, you don't necessarily have to get the super huge 100+ quart cooler, but you're going to need a sizable cooler for at least keeping the crawfish in initially. You can get by with one large ice chest and then something like an old kiddie pool for keeping the crawfish in until you're gonna actually put them in the pot for washing them a little bit. If you are gonna put your cooked crawfish after they've been boiled into the cooler to hang on to until you're ready to serve them, I would suggest using an older one because the heat, they come out boiling hot, and some coolers, they can start to kind of warp the plastic and stuff that line the cooler. So I would suggest an older one that you're not going to be concerned with it maybe getting a little heat warpage. Then you're going to need some form of a stock pot or boil pot. Actually, these are large ones for the outdoor, about anywhere from just over 30 quarts to they even make 80 quart ones. but you're going to want it to have that perforated with holes strainer basket. And then you will need a stirring paddle. It's for stirring, yes, but it also can help with moving the crawfish without putting your hands at the risk of getting pinched. It can also be used for lifting the strainer basket out of the pot, unless you're going to do like some gloves or something to be able to grab that handle. And even then, the paddle helps you get the grabber handle for the strainer basket. I also went on an extra thing this time, and I got me a skimmer. And the skimmers are, it's basically like a slotted or perforated spoon, and it's helpful for pulling out a little bit. It's also helpful for moving some of the crawfish around. And then you're going to need the ingredients and your preferred boil. You can look up a ton of different recipes of how to do it. Everybody has their preferences, their favorites. Two of the preferred boil manufacturers that make all the kind of seasonings in a packet are Louisiana fish fry products and Zatarain's. But I mean, it's kind of up to you. They come in both dry packages, and they also come in concentrate where it's been made into a liquid form. So that's entirely up to you which route you want to go there. Another nice touch would be like these supper platter plastic trays that you see different places. Now this is a small one, but they make the larger ones. But they're a good touch. You don't have to have one per person. That can get a little cost prohibitive, especially if you're not going to do this regularly. I mean, at our most recent one, a couple actually shared the plate, the bigger one, and they were both able to eat and use it, and it also added to the fun and fellowship of the event. Another thing that works, but they're not as common to find as they once were, if you could find the old like 24 case of soda flats, the cardboard flats, that was traditionally what everybody used, but now that everything's moved to more fridge packs, you don't see those as often, but that's also a good option. So then let's get down to the brass tacks. I mean, you got all the stuff for cooking them, but you also got to find live crawfish. So you need to find you a place that actually sells live crawfish in bags. They're usually in these kind of purplish bags that they get. Now, depending on your supplier, you may have to order those ahead of time. You can't necessarily just go like you were going to the seafood counter and, hey, I just want some shrimp, or I want some salmon steaks, or different things like that, or tuna steaks rather. You can't just go up in there and do that sort of thing. For some suppliers, they have to know, hey, I want some crawfish for this time, and they'll get their order in, usually coming from somewhere, either South Louisiana, South Alabama, or other places like that. So generally the rule of thumb is you should figure on, depending on how many people you're going to have at your event, about 3 to 5 pounds of crawfish per person. In my case, we were going to have about 12 to 15 people, so that meant, doing the math, 3 to 5 pounds per person, 12 to 15 people. That meant we were going to be anywhere from 36 pounds, which would have been basically about a single sack, to 75 pounds, and that would be on the higher end, and require more than one sack. Now, we ended up getting a 33 pound and a 34 pound sack, which was 67 pounds of crawfish, which was less than the 5 per person for the 15 level of 75, but we were also doing shrimp along with our boil, so that kind of balanced out. So once you get your crawfish, you have them in your cooler and you're doing your thing. Let me talk about a tough subject. Purging. Okay, now this is nearly religious dogma with some people. Okay, it's the idea of you are trying to make sure that crawfish, because he lives in roots and mud and They even call them mud bugs. So he's got stuff in his digestive tract. And the idea of purging is that you want him to empty as much of that out so that you're not eating any of that when you eat it. Because like once you remove the tail, you can see like the little intestinal tract, and some people get disturbed. Just like with shrimp, if you see that what they call mud vein. But here's the thing. So there were all kinds of things that persisted about the idea, wash them in a salt water bath, these sort of things. But in 2014, the Louisiana State University Ag Center did a study and found that none of that really does a significant difference for the crawfish and how they are. So the one thing that they found that did work was basically making the crawfish kind of fast for a 12 to 24 hour period while they're water soaked. Now, most of us, if we're going to do crawfish, we don't have the time for them to sit around in water and keep them alive for 12 to 24 hours. So that's generally not a big deal. And you can actually find suppliers that will sell them to you already commercially cleaned or purged. But if you find that, it generally adds about 15 to 20% to the price. So just be warned, if you really want it that super clean, the best way is that it was commercially purged or cleaned, but it's going to increase the cost that you're going to pay per pound of crawfish. Okay. Generally, just once you get them out of the sack into something like a kiddie pool. I mean, you can do it in an ice chest. It's a little bit harder, but you want to kind of just rinse them with a water hose, because they do, I mean, if they haven't been commercially cleaned or purged, they got mud and grass and stuff like that on them. And you want to kind of wash them, do a few cycles until the water is relatively clean. I mean, it's probably not going to get sparkling, pristine clean, because like a crab or any other kind of crustacean, they have all those feelers and things around the tail. And so there's still going to be a little bit of dirt, but that's on the outside. So you wash that to get the exterior clean. Then the actual cooking, once you set up your pots and your burners, you want to bring a sufficient amount of water to a boil. The general rule is that per pound of crawfish that you're putting in the pot, you want to do about 2 quarts of water per. And for most pots, I would not fill it beyond about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way full, to prevent one spillover when you actually drop the crawfish into the boil, but then also to prevent boiling over. Once it gets up to a rolling boil, you don't want it boiling over the sides, because that's a bad time. Once the water gets up to a rolling boil, you can add the boil mix and some of your some of your seasoning type things like lemons, garlic, onion. People have different opinions on all of those sorts of things, but you can put those things in there. Now, when you put them in, it's probably going to stop the rolling boil. You want it to get back up to a rolling boil before you start actually adding your stuff that you want to cook. Okay. Once it gets back up to a rolling boil, then you can actually add the items you're cooking, and in an order of how long they take to cook. I would suggest potatoes, if you're going to add those, which a lot of people love those should go in first. They generally take the longest to cook of anything, depending on the size of the potato. Most of the time they do the smaller new potatoes, and they take less time, but they still take longer than a lot of the things that you're going to put in there. Sausage can either be high on needing more cooking time or very low, depending on whether you get already fully cooked sausage or whether it is having to be cooked in the boil. Okay. Corn also takes a little while, not as long, but it does take a little while. Crawfish actually only take about, if you've got it up to that rolling boil, it only takes about 5 minutes. Because when you pull it from the boil, it's going to continue to cook because of the juices and the boil and the water and such that has gotten within that. So it's going to continue to cook, and you can get into where you might overcook it. So just be careful with that. And then if you're going to do like we did, do some shrimp. Shrimp are actually the super fastest of these to cook, and you really don't want to overcook those. So they would be even less time than the crawfish in terms of getting cooked. So some people also suggest removing that pot and letting it soak, or kind of like if it was tea, you'd say the steeping sort of process. That can help concentrate some of the flavor, and it can get more heat, I guess, out of the soak in the boil. But also, if you're worried about the cooking time, if you pull the strainer basket and you dump them into a cooler, they will continue to cook in that ice chest and finish out. So then once you get to that point, you really can start to enjoy them. Another thing from that LSU Ag Center study, another thing that you'll hear related to crawfish boils is, don't eat those with a straight tail. That means they died before cooking. In LSU study, they actually determined that not really. They tested with crawfish that were dead, they tested with crawfish that were alive, and saw that there wasn't really any noticeable general rule that you could determine, okay, if the tail's out straight, it died before cooking, or if the tail's curled up, then it was alive when it was cooked. So that's just another one of those things, along with purging, that gets there. I would say if you can tell one got crushed and everything like that, it's probably a good idea to maybe pass that one by and go for another one. But other than that, I hope you have a good time boiling. Like I said, there's a lot of other information. This is just what I've gathered from time, and it's just a fun way to do some stuff and enjoy being around other folks and having a good little bit of a meal along with it. So till next time.